Well, hello, friends and enemies and curious onlookers. I'm going to talk today about the COVID pandemic. No, actually, I can't do that on YouTube. And besides, the pandemic is over. Did you notice how it was conveniently replaced as it became obvious that it had been overplayed and was on the wane? And along comes a new crisis in Ukraine, and Russia is now threatening to blow up the world, or so they would have you believe. So yeah, that is the topic on everyone's mind. World War III, maybe. My interest, of course, is from the perspective of Bible prophecy. And as one of Jehovah's Witnesses for many, many years, of course, I studied all of the Watchtower's material and prophetic interpretations as regards the wild beast of Revelation and the king of the north and the king of the south. Well, back a few years ago, one of their annual meetings, the governing body had an aha moment, and they said, well, we know now after prayer and careful thought that Russia is the king of the north. And that was after 20 years when they said, we don't know who it is and better not speculate. But I think when Russia banned Jehovah's Witnesses, that had a lot to do with it. And so now that Russia has invaded Ukraine, well, it seems to have sealed the deal and vindicated the governing body as prophets, or at least capable prophetic interpreters. Well, I've done a few videos on the Watchtower's interpretation of the King of the North, so I won't rehash that. You can click on them down there or wherever they are and check those out. But I do have a special interest in what is happening now as it relates to the King of the North. When I first started, examining Bible prophecy, and I should say re-examining what the Watchtower teaches as regards the supposed fulfillment of Bible prophecy. One of the first articles that I published and posted on eWatchman, it's been almost 20 years ago, but it was entitled The Spanish Armada or World War III, which? And the reason for that title is because there's a prophecy in the 7th chapter of Daniel. You recall Daniel had a dream of this series of beasts that represented world powers. And the fourth beast was particularly fearsome, and it had 10 horns. And something strange happened. A little horn started to emerge from among the 10, making it an 11th horn, right? And it kept growing, and eventually it plucked out and uprooted 3 other horns. So I guess we're left with an 8-horn beast, because then this horn continues to grow and become bigger than the other horns. And the reason this is of interest to Christians is because the Ancient of Days comes in this vision, and the books are open, the books of judgment, and he judges this beastly system, and he gives the kingdom to someone like a son of man. Of course, that turned out to be Jesus. And there are ones on earth who are called holy ones, and the beast makes war against them and wins against them. But then when Jehovah issues his judgment in favor of the holy ones, then they win the victory. Well, the Watchtower teaches that the little horn that came up was the British Empire. Makes sense, yeah. There's been no empire like it, ruling a quarter of the Earth's territory and about the quarter of the world's population. And of course, most people imagine that the British Empire was dissolved. But as regards the three horns, the Watchtower claims that this happened going all the way back to 1588, I believe. And that was when King Philip of Spain sent an armada called the Spanish Armada. It consisted of about 130 galleons, big, sailboats with cannons. And his intention was to invade England because King Henry had converted England to Protestantism, established the Church of England, and booted out the Catholic Church. And Prince Philip wanted to restore Catholicism to England. And so he sent his armada up there to do battle. And the English responded, and they had smaller boats and were able to outmaneuver these big, huge warships. They sent little burning ships into them to catch their sails on fire. And but even at that, it wasn't really a resounding victory for England's navy. But the weather helped them out a bit. As the Spanish Armada, the wind changed, and they didn't want to be grounded on the European continent, so they sailed north, up around Ireland, Scotland and Ireland, and they ran into even more storms. And about a third of their fleet was sunk. And that was the end of their attempt to invade England and return it to the Vatican. But anyway, here's the problem with that. Spain was simply one kingdom. So let's say that was one horn. Well, the two other horns are supposed to be the Netherlands and France. And England did engage with both of those kingdoms, but over the course of 200 years. The final naval battle at Trafalgar was won, of course, by Lord Admiral Nelson. There's a big monument of him at Trafalgar Square in London. But see, it doesn't make sense. The little horn emerges and plucks them out pretty much simultaneously. And here we have this Watchtower interpretation where this slow pluckage over, 300 years or something. And it doesn't really make sense because, again, as the point of the prophecy is all about the ascent of God's kingdom and the war against these holy ones. Well, the Watchtower has an explanation for that. And it's in the past, too. It all happened back during World War I. 8 Bible students were arrested for sedition during World War I and spent a few months in jail, and that was it. Well, that ain't it. It's a totally artificial interpretation. And you might shrug your shoulders and say, so what? Well, I believe that we are seeing the initial fulfillment of this prophecy with this little horn emerging. Have the 3 horns been plucked out yet? No. But I believe that this process is well underway. And Russia is playing a part in it, but not the way you may think. Okay? Hold that thought. But first, let's delve into this prophecy a little more. Now, Daniel was fascinated with with this dream, and he wanted to investigate this fourth beast closer and wanted answers. And he was told, he said, then I wanted to know more about the fourth beast, which was different from the others. And it was extraordinarily fearsome with iron teeth and copper claws. And well, we know that's the Roman Empire. And that Roman Empire existed through the Holy Roman Empire. And yeah, Great Britain the British Empire inherited that mantle by defeating its rivals on the continent. But that wasn't the fulfillment of the prophecy. So now we're at the stage now where this beast with 10 horns has been crushing the world. The Anglo-American dominated beast has been crushing the world, and it's done it in a variety of ways. War is not the only way to crush nations. They're crushed economically and impoverished. They give them loans to the IMF, the World Bank, and manipulate their currencies. The loans have to be repaid in dollars, but they can't get dollars because that's how the game has been rigged to crush third world nations, prevent them from developing, prevent them from getting out from under the boot heel of this beast. Well, he said he wanted to know more about these 3 horns that fell. And the horn that came up, it said, that had eyes and a mouth speaking arrogantly, and whose appearance was bigger than that of the others. And he says, I kept watching, and the horn made war on the holy ones and was prevailing against them until the Ancient of Days came. So I was saying, in the 13th chapter of Revelation, we're shown a 7-headed beast. Now, that's a compilation of all the other beasts that Daniel saw, the 4 beasts. Revelation depicts 6 because in Daniel's day, 2 of the beasts had already come and gone, Egypt and Assyria. And Daniel picked it up at Babylon, Medo Persia, Greece, and Rome. And of course, Rome, the Empire of Rome, is, as I said, expressed through the Anglo-American Empire. So anyway, in the 13th chapter of Revelation, it shows a 7-headed wild beast, and one of its heads receives a mortal blow. In other words, the beast expires. It's killed. That's catastrophic. But it comes back to life. And when it comes back to life, it is given a mouth, speaking arrogantly and great blasphemies against God. That's exactly what is described in the 7th chapter of Daniel, with this little horn that comes up, has eyes and a mouth, and it speaks against God and wars against his people. So, even the Watchtower recognizes the parallel between these 2 prophecies. And of course, that happened during World War I. Supposedly, the Anglo-American beast suffered a mortal wound. They were the victors. How could... No. It doesn't add up, my friends. I mentioned this in a commentary the other day. By the way, some of you have left comments on my YouTube channel. I haven't posted a video in a few months. So where are you, Robert? Where? I have a website, and now I have a forum, and I write almost every day. So that's where I am. I'm not wandering off, lost somewhere. I don't have Alzheimer's yet, and hopefully I won't get it. I don't have dementia, I don't think. I don't wander off and scribble on the walls. So I keep busy, keep my mind active with these matters that I'm interested in. But I'm happy to be doing a video now. So anyway, now we realize these 2 prophecies are connected, different snapshots of the same event. And obviously the Anglo-American Empire has not suffered anything remotely analogous to a death blow. It's still very much a going concern. However, how would we say in Daniel, the writing is on the wall. Yeah, the writing is on the wall. And a lot of people have some sense that something is going to happen, some big impending economic crash, a war, but the Bible tells us what is happening and what is going to happen. So if we understand these prophecies, then we can speak with a little bit of authority and not just be speculating. Now, there is another component to this, and I'd like to take you to the 11th chapter of Daniel, if I can get loaded up here. And of course, the 11th chapter of Daniel is about the king of the north and the king of the south. And going down, let's see, verse 36. Now keep in mind, the Watchtower and Jehovah's Witnesses believe that Russia is the king of the north. And, some of them are getting excited. Oh, Russia is on the move. It's going to take over Europe. And okay, verse 36 is talking about the king of the north. The king will do as he pleases, and he will exalt himself and magnify himself above every god. And against the God of gods, he will speak astonishing things. And he will prove successful until the denunciation comes to a finish. Because what is determined must take place. Did you get that? He will exalt himself and speak astonishing things against Jehovah, the God of gods. And it's interesting, Nebuchadnezzar, when Daniel told him what he dreamt in the 2nd chapter, and then explained that he said, your God is a revealer of secrets and a God of gods. But now here, the king of the north is speaking astonishing blasphemies against the God of gods. Isn't that what the little horn does? He's given a mouth to speak these grand blasphemies. Same thing in the 13th chapter of Revelation. Snapshots depicting the same event. So, what can we surmise if we use our mind? The little emerging horn, the king of the north in this last manifestation, and the wild beast whose head gets slaughtered and comes back to life, they're all three the same entity. And Jehovah allows them to into this position to war against him. Let's get it out in the open. Yeah? So we haven't heard these astonishing blasphemies yet, but we're going to. And it will shock people. And of course, Jehovah will be justified in doing away with the beast. And that's the whole point, right? The king of the north. He will come all the way to his end, and he'll have no helper. Michael will take care of him. Okay, so you've heard talk of this great reset. And you might suspect that it hasn't really panned out yet. Because, well, it cannot happen without overturning the present order, right? The pandemic was like the first wave. And it was pushed heavily. We know that effective drugs were suppressed and hospitals were paid $17,000 more to treat a COVID patient. So they had an incentive. If people came in with a broken arm and they tested him, oh, he's got COVID. And then they treat him with some things that maybe they shouldn't have used, and well, he died of COVID. So, but that phase is over. And as I mentioned at the onset, as soon as it's over, now we've got the next phase. People, I don't know if people are too busy or too lazy to read, alternative things. They just accept what the mainstream says. They lied to us about COVID. Isn't that obvious? And the big tech platforms suppressed dissenting voices. That's how this beast operates. But we should know that Russia has been warning the West for a long time. Because after the collapse of the Soviet Union, it seemed like NATO should have been disbanded. The Warsaw Pact nations were disbanded, and the leaders back then gave assurances to the Russian leaders that they wouldn't push 1 inch eastward and threaten Russia. And the naive Russian leaders didn't get that in writing, and now, you hear them in the way, we never said that. Okay, but missile bases had been put in Romania and Poland some years ago, and the Russians warned, you say they're for defensive purposes? They can be changed with the push of a button, and fire a missile into Moscow with 5-minute lapse time. Unacceptable. But they didn't do anything about it. And then the coup in Ukraine, and over the last 6-8 months, weapons and munitions have been flooding into Ukraine. CIA advisors, military trainers have been training up these Nazi holdovers, and they began attacking the people in the breakaway republics and the Donbass. And information has come out on a retrieved laptop from the Ukrainian army that they had been given orders, the Ukrainian army and their Nazis embedded in them, to actually invade. So the West provoked this crisis, and Putin kept offering, let's sit down and talk about this. We want guarantees that, and they said, forget it. And they amped up the pressure. It's like two guys on the street, and somebody comes up to you, you don't even know him, he pushes you, and you're like, what's your deal, man? And he pushes you again. You say, hey, cut it out. If you do that again, I'm going to slug you. And he pushes you again. Who started the fight? It was the guy. You shouldn't have slugged him, right? That's Putin. He's the big bad guy now. He did this. But they wanted him to do it. They needed him to do it as a pretext for what they're about to do next. And it's already in operation. Have you noticed, maybe you fill your car up with gasoline, it's like, wow. And this was happening before this little blow up in Ukraine. But now it's all Putin's fault. If you're paying twice what you did last summer to fill up your petrol or gas tank, whatever you call it, it's not our fault, it's Russia's fault. Yeah. So we know that the inflation started to take off, and even though the bankers, the Federal Reserve in the United States said, "Oh, it's transitory, it'll be gone in a few months," didn't happen, and they have to keep pumping money into the financial system, or it comes down like a house of cards. So, zero interest rates, raise it a little bit. But they need the chaos of a war. And by the way, Ukraine is the breadbasket of the world, Ukraine and Russia. And they announced that there's going to be no more wheat exports. Hungary announced the same thing. They don't want their people to go hungry in Hungary, I guess. So they're limiting. exports of grains. And people are saying this is already going to cause starvation. Wouldn't we expect that to be the end goal? And now just today, Russia announced they're not going to sell fertilizer to unfriendly nations. So without fertilizer, and look, Russia's going to get the blame for this, but let's not forget that over the course of the last, I'd say 2 or 3 years, the Great Reset people have been working, and Prince Charles, this has been his pet project for a long time. To save the planet from overheating, we have to get rid of fossil fuels. We have to get rid of tractors that pull plows and combines and all that stuff. Too smoky, right? So he coordinated with all the biggest banks in the world, over 100 banks, and they all agreed to cut off funding to industries that produce greenhouse gases. So they're cutting off financing to fertilizer manufacturers, because a lot of gas is involved in that process. Not sure how that works, but obviously petrol production is being curtailed, and it was long before the invasion. But now they have a scapegoat, and the process is accelerating because of these sanctions on Russia and their retribution against the sanctions. So it is an intentional collapse of the whole financial and monetary system. And they hope to destroy Russia economically as well as China, because their alliance now is pretty firm. It's a military and economic alliance, and it threatens to eliminate the power of the City of London and Wall Street over the nations. And so that's why they're going to war, and they're provoking Russia to that extent. But it is not a Russian operation. This little horn is emerging. I'm certain of that. And it's going to get bigger and bigger. The 3 horns that'll be plucked out, well, I'm guessing it's USA, Britain, France, the 3 other members of the Security Council, Permanent Security Council, are the 3 nuclear powers, the biggest other than Russia and China, of course. I did a video on that some time ago, maybe 10 years. I'll put a link here for you. Anyway, okay. Thanks for watching.